Welcome, Game Chasers everywhere, to episode 23 of The Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. And I'm back this week with another cult classic that you may have missed out on, but believe me, this one is definitely worth your while, especially if you're into very cerebral, artistic experiences, and if you're a fan of something like the Tetris effect, which I talked about a few videos ago. This is going to be up your alley. We are, of course, talking about Rez Infinite, which came out back originally on October 13th, 2016 for the PS4 and PSVR, and then eventually came out to other platforms like the Amazon Luna, Android, Oculus Quest, and Windows. This is available now in very limited quantities physically for the PS4 via iam8bit.com in this new Eco-Forward edition. Now, this is the second version of the game that iam8bit produced. They did come out with original hard plastic Blu-ray case a few years back, which I slept on. It was out for a long time. I kept wanting to buy it, and then eventually it sold out. They did come out with the second edition, and it is limited to 5,000 copies. Now, unfortunately, iam8bit, unlike Strictly Limited, does not put like a progress meter on their game. So essentially, you kind of have to guess when this game's going to sell out. So sooner than later, if you're a fan of Rez Infinite or you're curious and you want to give it a shot, you want to pick this up, it's not going to be around for very long, so I would definitely get on that website sooner than later. So let's talk about the game itself. We'll get into some of the history because this is nothing new. This game's actually been in existence for a long time. It originally came out for the PS2 and Dreamcast back in 2001, but then got its Infinite version in 2016, and we'll talk about the differences between both and why you should consider this if you're not only a fan of like music, but shooters and overall psychedelia. Okay, so the game itself is an on-rails shooter with wireframe graphics set to pulsating electronic music and was inspired directly by the paintings of Russian painter Wasily Kandinsky, who was an early 20th century abstract painter and art theorist. And his whole thing had to do especially with synesthesia, and his idea of synesthesia was taking the sounds of like avant-garde music. For example, he was a big fan of Schoenberg. He would take the tones he would hear and try to translate them to art on the canvas. So it's a very deep philosophy that you can definitely read up on, but this resulted in the same concept being used for the game, where the concept of synesthesia is essentially where you stimulate one sense, and that stimulating of one sense translates into the stimulating indirectly of another sense to create this kind of total body experience, which Rez does very well through visuals, music, and also vibration through the controller. So like I said, the game is an on-rail shooter in the vein of classic titles by Sega like Panzer Dragoon, and when you're playing this, if you feel a Panzer Dragoon vibe, you're not mistaken, because basically most of the team that worked on Panzer Dragoon also jumped into this project to give their influence on it as well. So the main person behind this game was Tetsuya Mizuguchi, who was also responsible for Tetris Effect. So you can definitely see the similarities between style, visuals, and music. This game is basically broken down into 5 stages with 10 levels each. The plot loosely goes like this. You are a hacker who has entered cyberspace. And what's happened with cyberspace in the future is that it's become overwhelmed by data and it's become kind of corrupted. So what happened was they created this project called the K Project, which was underlined by this super entity called Eden, like this massively intelligent artificial intelligence. But what happened is that the cyberspace got so corrupted that Eden lost its sense of purpose and went to sleep and went away. So now you're this hacker who's entered cyberspace, and now you're basically traveling through fighting viruses and corrupted data management and security systems in an attempt to awaken Eden. But what you'll find as you progress through the 5 stages is that you're actually going through this philosophical concept of the singularity. And if you don't know what the singularity is, it's this concept that as technology gets better and better and evolves, eventually get to the point where it goes so fast that it will create a super artificial entity that will eventually surpass human intelligence and become more powerful than ever. And that's essentially what Eden is. And you're trying to awaken Eden, but also kind of achieve this singularity between technology and civilization. So it sounds very heavy, but it's also very cool. But regardless, even if you're not into the philosophy, it's all about the visuals and the auditory experience that really draws you into this. So like I said, there are 5 stages with 10 levels each. As you move through these, you will evolve your forms, right? So you start off on like this first level form, and over the course of the levels, you'll pick up these blue power nodes that will eventually upgrade you into these more evolved forms. But then you'll also collect these red nodes that will allow you to do screen clearing blasts. And the whole gameplay hook is that you have this homing reticule that can target up to 8 enemies at once. Again, think Panzer Dragoon. And as you release your shots, when the impact hits these entities, it'll actually create new notes that will correspond with the background music track to create extra musical layers. Again, enhancing this whole sense of synesthesia, where not only are you interacting with the music via your shooting, but also the vibration coming into your controllers corresponds with the notes, again, to create this whole total body experience to really immerse you within it. And then when you add into the fact that they've added VR capabilities to this game, you can imagine how mind-blowing this game can be. And to be honest, I've always been on the fence about VR, and I've been kind of one of those naysayers. Knowing the fact that PSVR 2 is coming out with 4K capabilities, and hopefully it's backwards compatible with these old games, the idea of being able to play Rez Infinite and Tetris Connected on VR just has me swimming in a sea of possibilities. So I can't wait. So back to the game. So as you progress through each of the 5 stages with this 10 layer levels, at the end of the 10th level, you'll fight a super boss, you'll go to the next level, and then you'll eventually travel through this story. Now, once you beat these 5 levels, you will then unlock the Beyond mode, which has a whole host of other cool modes like the Boss Rush mode. You'll have a Direct Assault mode, which is for like hardcore players where you actually have to travel through each of the 5 stages consecutively without stopping, without dying. That's pretty brutal. You've got a Lost Level that was included. You've got a more relaxed trance mode where there's no deaths, no enemies. And then also, you're going to be able to unlock the Area X, which was created specifically for Rez Infinite, which was added later. And this is a totally different concept and is kind of intended as like a pseudo sequel to Rez, where instead of being on rails, they used Unreal Engine 4 to throw you into like this free roaming space where now it's meant to feel more like Peter Pan and to give you more agency over the flow and the movement of the game. So lots to keep you into this game beyond the first 5 stages. And there's enough for hardcore players in terms of challenge to keep them going, but also if you got some friends looking over your shoulder at a party saying, whoa, that game looks pretty cool, there's enough for casual gamers to get into this as well. So there's something for everybody here. Now, the game itself was originally made for the PS2 and the Dreamcast and was initially conceptualized back in the early 90s, specifically around 1994 to 95. Tetsuya Mizuguchi at the time was known as the Sega arcade racing guy. He was working on the rally games, and while in Europe doing research for Sega Rally Championship 2, he came across a street festival where he saw a whole bunch of people just kind of swaying and vibing to like rave and electronic music, and that's where he originally got his inspiration for this project. So around 1999, his team at United Game Artists was working on Space Channel 5 for the Dreamcast, and that's around the same time that the work for Rez started. And the whole idea behind that was when they were working on Space Channel 5, they were trying to make something more musically based and that would appeal to not only hardcore gamers, but also casual audiences, be something for like everybody, right? And that's where Rez came from. They also wanted to make something that would appeal to as many people as possible. So they came out with this for the PS2 and the Dreamcast in Japan in 2001, and then a year later in North America. And what was actually cool about the PS2 version was that it also, in Japan only, included an extra controller called the Trance Vibrator because Mizuguchi wanted the experience to extend beyond just a simple vibration from the DualShock 2. He also wanted you to feel it in your skin, and it was like this like a little attachment you could wear that he also admitted could also technically be used for sexual purposes, but I guess that was like the unofficial thing. So the games came out, were critical darlings, but unfortunately commercial failures. They didn't sell a lot in Japan, they didn't sell a lot in North America, but they did win a lot of awards and a lot of accolades, so they definitely were in the cultural zeitgeist. So much so that in 2008, Microsoft Game Studios made an HD port for the Xbox 360, retaining the entire game, but in HD graphics and bumping up the frame rate from 30 frames to 60 frames. Then in 2011, for the PS3 and Xbox 360, Q Games, which was Mizuguchi's company at the time, they also made a spiritual successor you may have heard of called Child of Eden. I picked this up in a bargain bin. It's a fantastic game. Just as an aside, it was designed for the PlayStation Move, which I'm going to be honest is a little dodgy. This game is best played with a controller, but it definitely takes some of the concepts from Rez and just elevates them and makes it even more psychedelic and colorful. And I'll be honest, still kind of stands up to this day, and I hope that they'll eventually make a remaster of it. But that was like the spiritual successor, kind of intended as the unofficial second game in a trilogy, which means that we'll hopefully get another Rez eventually. And then, of course, in 2016, we get Rez Infinite, which includes all the HD visuals, the VR mode, and the Area X. So, very cool game. Lots going for it, especially the VR modes and the replayability. There's so much to unlock in this game. The fact that it's just so good to play at parties and to show off your HD TV to and just have that full body experience to really just gives you something unique, just kind of pulls you out the general video game experience to just truly feel something special. I really recommend this if you're into something very unique, very artsy, something you can kind of play with friends and have some fun with, and also just strap on the VR headset and have a total cerebral psychedelic experience. Very cool. Again, available in limited quantities right now via iam8bit.com for $44.99 US for the PS4 only in the new eco-forward packaging, VR enabled. You can't miss this one if you're into cool experiences that involve synesthesia, and if you're a fan of Mizuguchi, highly recommend this. You've been watching episode 23 of The Collecting Confidant with your host GunstarHero. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Later, Game Chasers, and peace.